In this module, we are going to analyze the fiscal policy in the ISLM model. The ISLM model is the representation of simultaneous equilibrium in goods and assets market. IS curve represents the good market while the LM curve is the reflection of equilibrium in the assets market. The fiscal policy, which is related to the government revenues and spending, shifts the IS curve and causes the disequilibrium, which is then corrected by the movement in the interest rates and income level. The income rises by a lesser amount as a result of the fiscal expansion in the ISLM model because a part of aggregate spending falls in the form of private investment when expansionary fiscal policy raises the interest rate. This dampening effect on output is called as the crowding out effect. This means that Keynesian government spending multiplier and fiscal policy multiplier of the ISLM model are different from each other, with the latter being lesser in the value than the former. The effect of fiscal policy in achieving the desired goal depends upon the slope of IS and LM curves.
Let us begin with the ISLM model. The ISLM, that is investment saving and liquidity preference money supply model, is a macroeconomic model that graphically represents two intersecting curves. The investment or savings, that is IS curve, is a variant of the income expenditure model incorporating market interest rates bracket demand bracket close, while the liquidity preference or money supply equilibrium, that is LM curve, represents the amount of money available for investing bracket supply bracket close. The model explains how equilibrium is achieved when the demand supply equates. At the intersection of IS and LM curves, equilibrium interest rate and income level are determined. At this point, goods market and money market are simultaneously in equilibrium. This is shown in given figure. At point E, economy is in equilibrium with Y naught income and R naught interest rate. A disequilibrium occurs whenever any of these two curves shifts due to change in exogenous variables like autonomous expenditure, including fiscal policy, and real money supply. The changes in fiscal policy shifts the IS curve while LM curve is shifted by changes in the monetary policy. This disequilibrium is eliminated by appropriate adjustment in income and interest rate. Money market adjusts relatively rapidly than the goods market. An important difference in Keynesian aggregate expenditure model and ISLM model is that the change in equilibrium income as a result of expansionary fiscal policy is lesser. This is because an increase in interest rate dampens the private investment spending and reduces the overall effect of fiscal policy. Now, we will see the effect of fiscal policy in ISLM model. IS curve describes equilibrium in the goods market and it is downward sloping because a fall in interest rate raises the investment spending, thereby leading to an increase in aggregate spending and the level of output at which the goods market is in equilibrium. Fiscal policy is related to the revenues and spending of the government. This can be implemented through discretionary changes in government spending or the tax rate. The government spending is a component of aggregate spending function and a rise in it given the interest rate shifts the AE curve upwards and the corresponding IS curve shifts to the right because for a given interest rate the equilibrium level of national income rises when autonomous spending rises. Similarly, a fall in government spending, that is, a contractionally fiscal policy, shifts the IS curve to the left because for a given interest rate, the equilibrium level of national income falls when autonomous spending falls. The IS curve shifts to the right when government spending rises and shifts to the left when the government spending falls. The magnitude of the shift in the IS resulting from a rise in autonomous spending is determined by the magnitude of the change in autonomous spending, that is delta G, and the size of the expenditure multiplier, that is alpha G. For a given change in autonomous spending, the shift in the IS curve will be larger. The larger is the value of the expenditure multiplier. Let us see the effect of increase in government spending. In the given figure, panel A, the economy is in equilibrium at point E naught, where AE is equals to Y, and this point is mapped in YR space as point A on the IS curve in panel B. The government undertakes an expansionary fiscal policy in the form of increased government spending, which raises the aggregate expenditure. The AE curve shifts above from AE naught to AE1. This results in higher spending and higher level of output and income. As IS curve is derived from AEY model, this change is reflected in terms of shift in the IS curve to the right from IS to IS dash. At IS dash, point B corresponds to point E1 in panel A, that is, higher income at the given interest rate R. The adjustment does not end here because we are considering the simultaneous equilibrium in goods and money markets in the ISLM model. Point B in panel B of figure is a point of disequilibrium in the ISLM model. The money market is no longer in equilibrium as the income has increased as a result of expansionary fiscal policy. People start demanding larger money balances at the given interest rate R. With the money supply fixed, the rising demand for money creates an excess demand for money at the original equilibrium interest rate, and rising interest rates motivate people to hold less cash. This is because the opportunity cost of holding wealth in the form of cash rises when interest rates rises. In panel B, when government spending increases as a result of fiscal expansion, the IS curve shifts rightwards. At unchanged interest rate, higher government spending increases the level of aggregate demand. As a result, income rises, and at each interest rate, equilibrium income rises. This corresponds to the shift of equilibrium income from A to B, that is, higher income from Y0 to Y1 at the given interest rate R. We measure the extent of shift in IS or the increase in income in this case by multiplier times the change in the government spending, that is alpha G into change in G. At point B, goods market is in equilibrium as planned spending is equals to output, but ISLM requires simultaneous equilibrium in goods and assets market. Point B is to the right of LM curve, thus it represents excess demand for money. This is because a fiscal expansion raises income. Higher income induces people to demand more money at the given interest rate. This excess demand for money with the given fixed supply of money raises the interest rate. As the interest rate rises, it causes a decline in planned investment spending because investment is sensitive to interest rate changes. As the interest rate rises, investment, which is a component of AE, falls because it is inversely related to interest rate. This leads to a fall in output from Y1 to Y2. So, when we the rising interest rates impact negatively on private investment, which offsets some of the increase in government spending. This dampening effect of increased government spending and a consequent fall in investment is referred to as crowding out. The rising interest rates that follow the increase in government spending crowd out other interest sensitive components of aggregate spending, in this case, private investment. Moving on to the phenomenon of crowding out effect, when the government uses expansionary fiscal policy with the objective to raise the level of income and output in the economy, it causes an excess demand for money in the money market, which raises interest rate and reduces the private investment spending. The rising interest rates impact negatively on private investment, which offsets some of the increase in government spending. This is referred to as crowding out. In short, the rising interest rates that follow the increase in government spending crowd out other interest sensitive components of aggregate spending, in this case, private investment. When government spending fails to increase overall aggregate demand because higher government spending causes an equivalent fall in private sector spending and investment, this is said to be the case of full crowding out. Apart from this, sometimes government raises spending and finances its deficit by borrowing in the domestic market and competing with the domestic private investors, thereby leading to a rise in interest rate. In the former case, when the private sector lends money to the government, they have less money to invest in private sector projects, thereby leading to crowding out of private investment. In the latter scenario, in order to borrow from private sector, the government may increase interest rates on its bonds to attract people to buy. These higher interest rates on bonds are likely to discourage private sector investment and spending. In this case, crowding out effect is said to be associated with the use of deficit creating fiscal policies. It should be noted that crowding out is not confined exclusively to the fiscal policy changes. Any of the autonomous spending components which can shift the IS curve and increase national income trigger the money market mechanisms that see interest rate rise and interest sensitive components of aggregate demand stifled. Hence, the severity of crowding out is largely determined by the magnitude of the crowding out effect. Greater the magnitude of this effective, the more ineffective fiscal policy would be in influencing output. So, the crowding out effects of fiscal policy must be minimized in order to maximize its effectiveness. Now, moving on to fiscal policy multiplier in the ISLM framework. The fiscal policy multiplier under ISLM model shows the change in equilibrium level of income as a result of the change in government spending, holding the real money supply constant. When there is an increase in autonomous spending as a result of increase in government spending, so that change in A is equals to change in G, the effect of this change in G is given by change in y naught divided by change in g is equals to gamma, where gamma is equals to h into alpha into g by h plus k into b into alpha into g. The expression gamma is the fiscal or government spending multiplier when the interest rate adjustment is taken into account. It can be clearly seen that gamma is different from alpha into g. The expression gamma is less than alpha into g because it is multiplied by a fraction h by h plus k into b into alpha into g. This represents the dampening effect of increased interest rate associated with the fiscal expansion in the ISLM model. When expansionary fiscal policy is adopted, it causes AE curve to shift upwards and leads to higher income. This higher income induces demand for real balances and results in increase in interest rate. This increase in interest rate discourages investment because in the IS curve, investment is a function of interest rate. So, the income does not increase by that much because of crowding out of private investment due to higher interest rate. A higher interest rate sensitivity reflected in terms of high value of B reduces the multiplier effect due to large reduction in aggregate spending. If the interest rate sensitivity, that is H, for real balances is lower, that is almost zero, then gamma would also be zero, and in such a case, LM curve is a vertical line. On the other hand, if H is very high, almost infinity, then this corresponds to horizontal LM curve and there will be no dampening effect on investment. A high value of K, that is income sensitivity of demand for money, would mean a lower multiplier value because in this case, large increase in interest rate is required to maintain money market equilibrium as demand for money is too responsive to income. Let us see the impact of alternate fiscal policy tools on interest rate and income. The expansionary fiscal policy tools of government spending and taxes raise the income or output level, but at the same time, interest rate also rises, which reduces the investment spending and dampens the overall expansionary effect of the fiscal policy. To offset the reduction in investment when interest rate rises, the government can provide investment subsidy. This fiscal policy tool raises the investment spending at each level of interest rate. Investment subsidy is sometimes given in the form of tax credits in order to encourage investment. When government subsidizes investment, it pays a part of the investment cost to the firms. This means that investment curve will shift rightwards at each level of interest rate. Let us analyze the effect of investment subsidy. In panel A of figure, investment curve shifts to right from I to I1 when government announces investment subsidy. It implies that at the same interest rate, investment will now be higher. This increased investment raises the aggregate spending and shifts the IS curve rightwards as shown in panel B. IS curve shifts by multiplier times the increase in autonomous investment brought about by the subsidy. To establish simultaneous equilibrium in goods and money market, interest rate rises along with the income. But now, although interest rate have risen, the investment is still higher on the new investment curve I1. Thus, fiscal policy in the form of granting investment subsidy increases the interest rate, consumption, income, as well as investment. Let us see the impact of fiscal policy with different slope of IS and LM curves. There are many factors which determine the effectiveness of the fiscal policy adopted by the government with the objective to expand the level of income and output in the economy. The fiscal policy cannot have full multiplier effect on the economy under ISLM framework as the interest rate adjustment dampens the expansionary effect of the fiscal policy on output. The extent of the financial crowding out depends on the slope of IS and LM curves. The flatter the IS curve, lesser change in income and interest rate will occur. The steeper the LM curve, the less expansionary will fiscal policy be and the larger is the crowding out effects. The steep LM curve signifies that the demand for money, transactions, and precautionary motive is highly sensitive to national income changes, and the speculative demand for money is less sensitive to the changes in interest rates. Thus, small changes in national income lead to large changes in excess money demand at a given money supply level and the rise in interest rates to restore money market equilibrium. Other things equal, has to be larger as a consequence. Additionally, for a given excess demand for money, the interest rate increase that is required to restore money market equilibrium is larger. Crowding out will be greater when investment is very much sensitive to interest rate changes. Let us see the effects of expansionary fiscal expansion with the following cases of different slopes of IS and LM curves. In given figure, it can be seen that steeper the IS and LM curves, the lesser is the crowding out, as the demand for real balances is quite insensitive to changes in interest rate. Also, steep IS curve implies smaller sensitivity of investment spending to changes in interest rate. Thus, crowding out is lesser in this case. In given figure, a flatter LM curve implies that demand for money is highly sensitive to changes in interest rate. In this case, a small increase in interest rate is enough to maintain the money market equilibrium. As IS curve is also steep, the fiscal policy is quite effective with lesser crowding out of investment. A flatter IS represents that investment spending is highly sensitive to changes in interest rate. Thus, even a smaller interest rate increase crowds out a significant level of investment, thereby dampening most of the expansionary effect of fiscal policy on income. A steep LM curve, on the other hand, implies lesser sensitivity of demand for money to interest rate and larger responsiveness of money demand to the changes in the income. It means that a given change in income has a larger effect on interest rate in case of flatter IS and steeper LM curve, as can be seen in given figure. A flatter IS implies that investment spending is highly sensitive to changes in interest rate. Thus, even a smaller interest rate increase crowds out a significant level of investment, thereby dampening most of the expansionary effect of fiscal policy on income. But this, along with an equally flatter LM curve, implies that demand for money is also very sensitive to the changes in interest rate. So, a lesser rise in interest rate is enough to bring money market in equilibrium. Thus, crowding out is lesser as interest rate rise is small in case of flatter IS and flatter LM curve, as shown in the given figure.
Let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. First, the ISLM, that is Investment Saving Liquidity Preference Money Supply model, is a macroeconomic model that graphically represents two markets, that is goods and money market, which are simultaneously in equilibrium. Second, an expansionary fiscal policy change, I repeat, an expansionary fiscal policy change increases the national income and interest rate. Third, the rise in the national income is less than the change in the government spending because the higher interest rate crowds out the private investment. Fourth, the fiscal policy tool of investment spending raises the investment even when interest rate rises. Fifth, the fiscal policy multiplier in ISLM framework is lesser than the Keynesian multiplier. Sixth, the extent of the crowding out depends on the slope of the IS and LM curves. The steeper is the LM curve, the less expansionary will the fiscal policy be, and the larger is the crowding out effect.